Hey everybody, welcome to Secure the Seat Live. I'm your host, Minda Hart, and this is your weekly live podcast, and we talk about what it takes to secure your seat at the table. Happy that you're here. How was your weekend? Tell me. Use the chat. I know that many of you are watching us on LinkedIn primarily, but also YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And just so happy that you're here because you could be spending your time doing anything, any place, anywhere, and you're here with us. Today, we are going to be talking about difficult conversations because it's actually something that I have found that can be troubling for many of us in the workplace. And sometimes we just don't give ourselves permission to create the space for us to be able to do that. And so it's really important that we want to talk about that today. So please utilize the comments wherever you're watching us. Drop your information in the chat. I want this to be an active conversation between the both of us. But again, happy Monday if you're watching us live. It's so great to be here with you all. We're in a new month, May, so we also have a new affirmation for the month. So if you have been rocking with us every Monday, welcome back. If this is your first time, we welcome you. You are part of the squad. You are family. So listen, I can't move on with the show today without acknowledging my friend and the friend here on Mondays, Annette. I hope you don't mind, but I know you are celebrating a milestone of retirement, and so we just want to give you your flowers while we're here. So everybody give some love to Annette. I know she's gonna strangle me, but but I just want us to honor her and anybody else who might be retiring or doing something, because it's really important that we get a chance to do that. I know when my great-great-grandmother passed away when I was in high school, she had retired and she didn't get to enjoy her retirement because she passed away shortly after. And so I think it's really important that we celebrate ourselves. We give each other the flowers that we deserve while we're living, while we're breathing, while we're able. And so it's just a beautiful thing to be able to transition to another chapter in life, right? We're retiring from one place to move on to the next and walk in our brilliance and our genius. And so let's just give our fam some congratulations. And so that's a beautiful thing, right? I am proudly waiting on the day that I could say the same thing. But in the meantime, we support you, and we're excited on your next journey. But again, today we're going to be talking about difficult conversations. I have to ask you, why do you think having difficult conversations in the workplace is so hard? Please drop it in the chat. I want to hear your thoughts because there's something that keeps us from having the conversations that we need to. And even the tips that I'm going to talk about today, I hope you will take it into your next situation, whether it's at work or it's in the home. We have to have difficult conversations. One of the chapters in my latest book, You Are More Than Magic, I hope that you have picked it up for yourself if you want it, but then also for a young adult in your life. There's a whole chapter committed that I wrote about difficult conversations because I want to also give our teams the tools they need to be able to articulate their wants, their desires, but also equally be a good listener, right? Part of having difficult conversations is not about just what we want to say, but it's also about listening. And I think that sometimes people have a hard time with that part, right? Do we actually want to engage in a two-way conversation, or do we just want to get it off our chest? Right? So we have to be honest with ourselves first and foremost, why we want to even have this conversation. What are the goals? What is our intentions? Right? What is our perception of what the situation has that we're in? Right? So it's really important that we talk about that. And it's hard. I'm going to tell you, as a business owner, as an adult, there's not a week that I don't have to have a difficult conversation, but I can reframe that to not continuously tell myself that this is a difficult conversation, but this is an important conversation that I need to have for my psychological safety, period. Right? And I see many of you talking in the chat about having those difficult conversations. Fear, right? Part of psychological safety is eliminating that fear, right? So we may not get the outcome that we want, but Did we create the boundary? Do people know? Do our coworkers know what good looks like to us? Right? And I think that we can't have a psychologically safe workplace if people don't feel comfortable being able to articulate how they're experiencing the workplace. Again, two things can be true at the same time. Many of our colleagues may never experience some of the things that we experience day in and day out, but that is our experience, right? And if you are a colleague that hasn't experienced racism or sexism or homophobia or ageism or whatever the case may be, then we have to be very careful for us to say, oh no, that's not what so-and-so meant, or that doesn't happen here. That wasn't racism, right? What would it be to listen to that person's experiences to say, that is their experience. Let me hear them out. And I think it's so important in the workplace that we create a culture of courageous listeners, right? Oftentimes, if you've heard me speak, I talk about courage a lot. And the definition that I use is the ability to do something that frightens one. And oftentimes having these conversations are difficult. They're scary, right? But we know potentially our situation might be a little bit better, even if that person doesn't treat us any differently, but they know where we stand. Sometimes it's just for people to know where your line in the sand is, right? And why is this important? Because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And our mental health, I believe, is dependent upon partially us having these difficult conversations, because the workplace can't change. People can't know what good looks like to you if you haven't told them. Oftentimes, when I'm in doing consultancy work for different corporations, I'll be in closed door sessions with leaders, and they'll be like, well, I don't think that's happening here, Minda, because our Black women are smiling on the Zoom and they've never expressed discomfort or whatever. And I said, just because someone didn't tell you that this is what they're experiencing doesn't mean they're not experiencing it. They probably don't feel comfortable coming to tell you because this space has never been safe for them to be able to tell you what they're experiencing without fear of losing something. And I feel like it's really horrible if you're working in an environment that you have to fear saying your experience, fear of losing your job, fear of not getting the promotion. That's a cycle of abuse. I write about it in Right Within, and I have to use that kind of language because I think we've done enough of tiptoeing and walking on eggshells about what these things are. It's abusive and toxic work environments if there's no space for you to go to. If you don't feel safe going to HR, the place that is supposed to be a safe haven, allegedly, for a lot of people, then we need to have a place to feel safe to go. If it's not HR, then where is the place, right? And I know that companies and organizations don't want the place to be the law firms. They don't want it to be EEOC. So if you don't want people to have to pull that lever, create the space for people to have good conversations in the workplace to be heard out. Okay, so today we're talking about psychological safety and having difficult conversations. And even if your workplace is not creating that, we can create it for ourselves. I mentioned that May is mental health. If you have not gotten right within, even if you haven't dealt with racialized trauma, if you've experienced any trauma in the workplace, I would suggest you pick that up, and we will drop the links in the chat. Wherever you are on the journey, the memo Right Within, You Are More Than Magic, is for you. It's for somebody you know. Okay, so let's jump into it. We know that having difficult conversations for some of us is hard. For others, you can pick up the phone right now, email somebody, and you won't even blink twice. Just say what you need to say, right? But are we doing it with finesse? Are we doing it with the space, with the intention of, I hope we can get to a resolution? Whenever I think about a difficult conversation that I need to have, first and foremost, 9 times out of 10, I want to be able to get to a resolution. I want to be able to do that. And so let's start with it. So when I'm thinking about, if you need, obviously this will be recorded, so if you don't get a chance to take notes, but just think about something. You might have to have this difficult conversation about something. I know that some of you are thinking like, yo, I need to have a conversation with somebody. I'm going to challenge you this week. If you got to have a conversation with your manager, a colleague, somebody at the house, wherever you got to do it, your landlord, use this framework today. and just think about how you might go into a conversation a little bit differently. So very quickly, the things that I think about, there's 3 things that I start with when I'm thinking about having a conversation, a difficult conversation that could be potentially difficult, is number 1, I think about my emotions. Number 2, I think about my perception. Number 3, I think about openness. So, number 1, my emotions. If I have a situation that's been causing me distress, I'm not going to sweep it under the rug. I am going to yes, thank you so much. Right Within is available on audio. I appreciate that. I think about my emotions because I think first and foremost, especially as women and women of color, oftentimes we've been conditioned to just sweep our emotions under the rug. We tell ourselves a different story so that we can make it through the day, maybe one that is not helpful to us, just so we can get through, right? And that might look like, oh, that's just Chad being Chad, or they didn't mean any harm, or maybe I'm taking it the wrong way. Full stop. If you've been disrespected in the workplace in any way, shape, or form, first, it's okay to acknowledge your emotion to that. It's a-okay to say, you know what, that didn't feel good, right? Even if you don't tell anybody else about it, what would it look like if we tell ourselves, if we're honest with ourselves? If we can't be honest with anybody else, Secure the Seat Squad, I hope that you will be honest with yourself. So what emotions are you feeling about the situation? So let's use an example. There was a time where I had a speaking engagement and I found out that I was being underpaid than the other speakers. The other speakers were white women. I was being underpaid, right? Number 1, when I found out, my emotions wanted me to go from 0 to 100 real quick. I was not happy, right? But I didn't have to not tell myself a different story, but it was okay for me to feel disappointed, right? It's okay for us to feel that way. I don't have to stay there, but I can acknowledge that this is not okay. It doesn't feel good to me. And I think that that's part of our healing journey. That's part of our mental health, is acknowledging it to ourselves first. Number 2, perception. What do I perceive this situation to be, right? So if we only look at it from our perspective, I could say, well, now that I found out that I'm trying to be underpaid, are they doing this on purpose? Are they trying to play me? Are they trying to be disrespectful? Or this is my initial perception, right? Or did something happen between the last speaker and me that maybe budgets have changed or something like that? So I try to think about it from a holistic point of view. What am I perceiving the situation to be? And what could some possible perceptions on their end be? Right? Because my goal is to come to a resolution, or at least people know where my boundaries are and I can make an informed decision on what I need to do next. But again, I think about my emotions. I sit with them for a little bit. Number 2, my perception. How am I perceiving this situation to be? So for example, if you're in a meeting and somebody says, oh, Black people love those bright colors, right? And they go on for 15 minutes to joke around about how Black people like bright colors. I'm perceiving this situation as racist. That is my perception of it, right? But somebody else might perceive that as they were just joking, or they thought they had a relationship with you so they could play around like that. Either way it goes, we need a difficult conversation needs to be had, right? Because I don't want to be perceiving that my manager is racist. Maybe he is, maybe he's not, but my perception will only have me looking at it just from my perspective, right? If that makes sense. And so I think it's important to kind of look at it from a lot of different angles. So whenever I'm talking in front of a group, I think about it from 3 perspectives. I talk about some difficult things when I go into a company. And so I think about it from the person that's experiencing it. I think about it from the manager's perspective, and I think about it from a colleague's perspective. So all 3 of these kind of situations, everybody has a different viewpoint of how this situation has occurred, right? But I'm still centering my perception of it, but it may not be 100% accurate. So we have to also understand that how we're perceiving something may or may not be true. Okay. Number 3 is openness. Am I open to even have a 2-way conversation? Am I even open to hear what this person has to say after I present what I need to say about this situation? Am I open to hearing them out? And I think part of having a difficult conversation in any type of forum is, are we open? Do we have the capacity to hear someone out? We may or may not agree with what they're saying, but are we open to having a two-way conversation, right? Communication isn't just about what I need to say, it's about my capacity to listen as well. Because when we're engaging in this conversation, we're also going to find out some new information, right? So am I open to even hearing it, or am I so in my emotions that I can't even hear you? You know? And so I think it's really important for us to be able to think about it from that perspective so that we actually are able to move forward with it. Because if we're having a difficult conversation, isn't the goal to be able to eliminate this barrier and not create more? So we have to have some level of openness. Again, doesn't mean that we're shrinking or any of those sorts of things. So when you're thinking about going into it, think about your emotions, think about the perception, and think about, am I open or not? And if you're not open, is this the right time to have the conversation, right? So just some things to think about. This isn't the end all be all, but I also think it's important for your perspective. Let's drill down into that a bit. Oftentimes we're entering into a conversation, and because we are fueled by our emotions, our perceptions, we're not able to hear somebody out. I hope that we will commit to hearing people out. Again, you may not agree with what they're saying, but we want them to hear us out too, right? And so I just want you to think about being committed to a two-way conversation if it's possible. But the other thing I want to talk about here is that other people don't have the same tools we have. I'll say it again. Other people don't have the same communication tools that we have. So we may never get what we need from them out of the conversation, but we can control what we're doing. Dr. Maya Angelou has a quote, and she said, we can't control what other people do to us, but we can control if we'll be reduced by it. And so I don't want the situation, even if it goes left, for you to be reduced by someone's negativity. Even if they meet you, you're meeting them positively, but they meet you with some negativity. I understand that, but don't let that shrink you. Don't let that stop you from engaging in the conversation, because that means that they don't have their tools. They're not right within. They can't necessarily engage properly because they don't have the tools to do so, but that shouldn't stop me from letting you know what my boundaries are. And I think it's very important that we understand that, right? But going into it, you already know that Chad may not have the tools to engage in a healthy dialogue, but I'm not going to let his lack of emotional intelligence stop me from letting him know what good looks like to me, stop me from having this conversation with him, because at the end of the day, we can document that we actually had this conversation. I often hear leaders say, well, why didn't they tell me? I could have maybe done something. Okay, well, A, they didn't feel safe, or they've seen how they've come to you before and you don't do anything. There's so many reasons why people don't come and engage in a difficult conversation. But if this is something you need for documentation, no one could ever say to you, oh, they never said anything. Because that's what people's go-to is, especially people with no tools. So they love to lean and make it gaslight you into thinking that it's your fault. So nobody's going to gaslight us. We're taking control. We're reframing the situation, that I get to have this conversation because this is part of my self-care. Again, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I want us all to be able to be free at work, to thrive and not just survive. And part of not just surviving in the workplace or any other place for that matter is letting people know what good looks like to you. And it's so, so important. Okay, the next part of this is when you have the conversation, right? So you might be nervous. Anybody ever feel nervous about going into a difficult conversation? There's not a time that I don't ever not feel nervous about it. But having a difficult conversation is part of my self-care, and it's part of my self-advocacy. So one of the things that I think about when I go into these conversations is bet on myself. Number one, I'm going to bet on myself, because if nobody else in this workplace is going to do it or show up for me, I can do it for myself. As Audre Lorde said, beware feeling you're not good enough to deserve it. You can show up for you in this moment. So I'm going to bet on myself. I know my situation. I know what needs to be said. I'm going to encourage myself. Number two, Donald Lawrence, for my church folks out there, he has a song called Encourage Yourself. Sometimes you have to encourage yourself, because there's that little voice on the side of you who will say, don't do it, shrink, just push it under the rug. It's fine. Just make it to 5. No, we've been trying to make it to 5 for too long. Okay, now it's time that we let people know what good looks like to us, and we have to have these conversations. Okay, so don't let that little voice in your head discourage you from showing up for you. I think sometimes we give so much power for other people to show up for us, which is fine. We need advocates, we need allies, we need success partners, but you are your best advocate. You are your best advocate. So let's redefine what success looks like and encourage ourselves to show up. Okay. The other part of that is have your receipts. I just mentioned documentation. When you engage in a difficult conversation, some people will try to gaslight you and tell you that that's not what it is, or no, I didn't mean it that way. Okay, well, actually, for the last 5 meetings that I've been in with you, you've actually said, and I quote, blah, 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 blah. Because sometimes you have to just roll up on people and let them know I didn't create this situation in my head. Tuesday, Thursday, and 2 Fridays ago, you said X, Y, and Z. So if you didn't mean any harm, what did you mean? I'm curious about that. You know what I mean? So, so documentation, I'm being a little facetious, but documentation is so, so, so important. Okay. So if you're going to 9 times out of 10, you're going to need some receipts, because when you're one of few or the only in the workplace, people will try to make you feel like you created the situation on your own. But let's root these things in fact. I rarely, over the years I've learned, I don't say, well, I felt like Chad was being racist. I typically don't use language like that. I like to root it in the facts. Actually, when I was in my last one-on-one with you, you said that Black people love their bright colors. I'm curious what you meant by that, because that really made me feel uncomfortable. So I didn't make it obscure. You said some things that made me feel like this. No, I have to root this in concrete facts, and I've been documenting it, so I actually have my receipts. So now that you have this information, right, I can't control how Chad responds to me, but I can control how I prepare for this difficult conversation. And that's empowering. That should be empowering for us, right? Again, Chad or whomever may not have the tools to be able to engage in a two-way conversation, but I'm proud of me. I'm continuously encouraging myself through this conversation. I'm growing through it, right? Even if I make a misstep in what I wanted to say, I'm finally patting myself on the back for coming and showing up for me. What would it look like if we show up for ourselves during the week in all the spaces that we occupy? That we don't have to shrink, that we don't have to wait for someone to say, yeah, it was racism, or it was sexism, or whatever ism that you're experiencing in the workplace. Like, we can show up for ourselves, right? So it's very important that we do that. So receipts are so important. And then number 4, part of that is going onward. We don't want to rehash it on a wheel in our head and ruminate on it. We've said what we said, right? We're moving forward. We're not going to regress in this conversation. I don't know about you, but there was a time where I would be engaging in a difficult conversation, and then somebody with toxic tools would then say something, and then I would be the one apologizing by the end of the conversation. Like, what kind of nonsense is this? Okay, like, you've harmed me and now I'm apologizing to you. No, that's not how this is working anymore. You know what I'm saying? It's like, enough is enough. All right, we're going to continue to encourage ourselves. We're going to say what we need to say, as we say here a lot. Say what you mean without saying it mean. You can come and have a difficult conversation without being, quote unquote, aggressive or angry or any of those things. But again, that's that person's perception, perhaps, right? But we can engage in these difficult conversations, because this is the part of the workplace that we can control, if we have the conversation or not. Again, we can't control the outcome. We can't control how someone else shows up, if they're going to be a courageous listener or not. But we can think about all the things we've been talking about today. So again, our 3 things for starters: emotions, perceptions, are we open? Then when I'm about to have the conversation, I'm betting on myself. I'm telling myself that I'm good enough to deserve having a conversation that recenters me, that doesn't harm me, that provides psychological safety to myself. Because I don't want to go through the rest of my workday harmed. I have control over this piece of the puzzle. I can encourage myself when that little voice or that imposter syndrome tells you, just be happy that you got the job. Okay, but I have colleagues who get to be happy that they had the job and have the difficult conversation. So why can't I have that too? You can. You can, but you have to strategize about it, right? You might need someone from your squad to help you walk through the conversation, to practice that sort of thing. It's really important. You want to, your receipts, you need those receipts, okay? We got to have the receipts, especially if I hate to say it, but if you're like in marginalized communities or you're one of few, we need to have the receipts because, again, not all of our colleagues have the tools that they need to engage in these type of conversations. And that's just the bottom line. But we're not going to shrink. Okay. Then the next part, we're going back to navigating our emotions. Again, we could say what we mean without saying it mean. We're rooting our conversation in fact. We're not speaking ambiguously about the situation that occurred. We're saying exactly what had happened, why I'm bringing this to your attention. And something like that could be with your manager in email or conversation. You know, Jim, I had something that I was experiencing and I really would love to talk to you about it. But first, I need you to hear me out on a couple of things, right? I'm setting the stage about what this is. Carla, I know you might have heard about a situation that happened last week. I would love to talk to you about that. It may be a little bit difficult, but I think I have some color that I can shed on this. And because I really want to get to a resolution so that I don't feel harmed anymore, right? Sometimes we have to just, we have to put it out there. We have to be direct. Brene Brown says clarity is kindness. We have to be clear with people about what's going on so they can know, so no one could ever say, I didn't know this was happening. They never came to me. Okay, so it's really important that we don't give anybody any leeway to be able to make us feel any kind of way about it. You know, like we showed up for ourselves. Again, we may not be able to control what that person does or says to us, but we should take heart in knowing that we showed up for ourselves. And that is a win. Okay. Okay. Next, after we've said what we said, we had the conversation, we can end it. Again, reminding ourselves we can only control what we can control. We don't have to go back and forth in our mind. Again, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Whenever we're ruminating on negativity, it creates chronic stress in our bodies. And you know what happens when you have chronic stress in your body? It leads to sicknesses and disease and potentially death. And we don't want that. We deserve better than that. I'll be darned if I because I did let my workplace stress me out in the past, make me sick, anxious, depressed, worried, all the things, questioning my sanity. I'm not going to allow any other workplaces to do that to me because it impacted my mental health. And it's only the grace of God that I'm here talking to you today that I was able to overcome those things. But it started with a difficult conversation. I'll never forget when I was experiencing some of the most hellacious times in my workplace. I had to show up for myself. I had to give myself that courage. I had to encourage myself to go into the most senior woman at the company and talk to her about what was going on. She did not meet me with dignity, humanity, and respect. She gaslit me to the 10th degree. But the one thing that I'll never regret doing is showing up for myself that day. I was a little fragile. I was a little nervous. I was a little scared. I didn't know, I kind of knew what the outcome might be, but at least I showed up for myself. No one could ever say that. We didn't know Minda was oppressed 365 days that year. You know, I have come and had the conversation with you, so you can decide what you want to do after that. But at least I showed up for myself. And that is really, really being your best advocate. It's not just some cliche. Like, let's walk this thing out. Let's demonstrate what showing up for ourselves looks like. And it doesn't mean we have to be combative. Here's the thing I want you to know about difficult conversations. It's not about being combative. Having a difficult conversation should not be about being combative. It should be about, I want to enter into this, hopefully we can have a resolution. But if we can't, at least this person knows where I stand. I've drawn my line. I talk about it so much in Right Within, about drawing your line and then vibrating higher. Like you said the thing, right? And now I'm going to vibrate higher because I'm not going to stay in this space with you if you're not able to meet me with dignity, humanity, and respect. And that's in anything, not just the workplace. My home life, my personal life. I just don't have the energy to be able to deal with it. And if you don't have the tools to engage with me, then I'm not going to run. I just can't allow myself to deal with that, because the chronic stress, I know what that feels like on my body, and I'll protect it by any means necessary. My mental health is everything. You know those commercials back in the day, the mind is a terrible thing to waste? It really is. And so we have to. Okay. So some other things that I want you to think about as we close out is some additional things to consider when you're having a difficult conversation. Ask yourself, what do I want to get out of having this conversation? Do you want the other person to listen to you, or do you just want to get it off your chest, or do you want to really engage in a two-way conversation? You have to be honest about why you're having this conversation. What do you hope to get out of it? Number two, what do you want to say? If you know that this has been difficult, you've been experiencing difficulty inside the workplace, I would encourage you not just to run off the top of your head with it. Think about what it is you want to say. What are your talking points? What are the main themes you want to cover? Because sometimes when we're in these situations, we get kind of flustered, and then we kind of don't get a chance to say what we want to say. But if we thoughtfully think about it and prepare, talk with somebody else about it, this will help you organize your thoughts and your goals related to the conversation. So you don't start off talking about how your manager is always interrupting you in meetings, and then because you get flustered or something, now you're talking about your kids hitting the piñata Saturday at the party, right? like you can talk about those things, but this is what we're here for, right? And so let's get our thoughts organized and be prepared to engage in this conversation so that people take it seriously, right? Number three, timing. Timing is critical. Do we think having this difficult conversation should we be having this at the top of Monday morning with somebody, or would it make sense to maybe have it in the afternoon when someone's actually had time to get to their desk, settle in a bit, right? Do I want to have this conversation at 4:45 when you know somebody is almost out the door? So thinking about when timing is everything, because you're going to get a better response at certain times. Like in my young adult book, You Were More Than Magic, in the chapter of difficult conversations, I talk about with the young adults, like if you want to talk to your parent about something, it's probably not the time when your dad just had, or your guardian just had a really tough day and they just walk through the door and you already see it on their face and you're like, hey dad, I need to talk to you about something. You're probably not going to get the best response. You're not going to get somebody who's fully engaged when they're having it. Or if you're partnered with somebody and when that partner walks through the door, they've had a tough day, they just want to chill for a second, they want to watch TV, they don't want you just to jump in right when the door opens, right? Because you're not going to get the best out of the conversation. So I want you to think about timing. Timing is everything. The next part of that is keeping it real. This is your opportunity to be open, honest, and direct. You can't control how they respond, but you can control how you give the information and how you handle what they say to you. So again, keeping it real is really important. And last but not least, don't forget to listen. I started out the top of the hour with us talking about listening. We have to listen to what that other person has to say too. And I think that this is so important. As leaders, we need this. We need to be listening. We all have the capacity to lead. I often ask the question to my guests, what's one tip you would give people to make the workplace better than we found it? I'm going to give you the tip today. It's be a listener. Be a courageous listener. Hear people out. Don't be thinking about what's the next thing I want to say and get my point across. We're engaging in a two-way conversation. That is the goal. Last thing I'll say is, what if it goes wrong? What if you don't get the outcome that you want? Because we know that having difficult conversations is like playing Russian roulette. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, right? But I wish I could tell you that every conversation that you have that's difficult, it will turn out the way that you need it to be. But sometimes conversations are messy. Sometimes people don't have the tools they need. But don't let that stop you from creating your boundaries and owning that. That's what you have control over. Okay? And so listen, if we all start to have these difficult conversations, you know what happens? We normalize them. That they're not just this thing that happens over here. that now we have the tools that we can just engage in conversations because we've normalized them. They're difficult because we're not used to having them. But once we start to normalize them and role model for people, what healthy looks like, what good communication styles look like, then it's beautiful. So I wish we had more time. I think throughout the summer, as we're thinking about some things, I think I may do a little bit more of this, but I know that a lot of people, when you email me or message me, I would say 90% of the messages that I get from people is, how do I have that conversation? And think about all these things, regardless of the reason why you're having it, the intention behind it. But think about all the different levels and levers that you can pull for this. You are your greatest asset. And I'm excited for you. We're rooting for you. Rewatch this if you need to, but I hope that it's helpful, just kind of thinking about it from a different perspective. I hope you'll be encouraged to have it. Tweet me or LinkedIn message me or post about any difficult conversation that you might have had this week and how that turned out for you. Rooting for you. What, again, part of the piece that we can control is what we do. We can't control what the outcome might be, but we can control if we do it or not. So I hope this helps. So excited that you are here to join us today. We have a new month. Happy May. I'm going to bring my partner in Shine, Mike, up so that he can give us our May affirmation so we can get out of here and do what we need to do, perhaps even have some difficult conversations if we need to. But Mike, go ahead and join me. Hey, bro.
Minda, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Bless. Awesome conversation. You rocked it today. That was amazing.
Thank you so much. So what's up? What is our affirmation for this month? I can't believe we're in the 5th month of the year. Wow. Okay. What do you got for us?
Absolutely. It's flying by. Since May is Mental Health Awareness Month, the affirmation this month is, this too shall pass. I know we've heard this before, but this too shall pass, not because things happen magically and they just pass, but this too shall pass because we're going to get the right help we need this month. We're going to have the difficult conversations this month, as you talked about. We're going to face our fears this month. We're going to see the help we need to see. We're going to, go for that promotion, go for that raise, start that business, talk to our boss. This too shall pass. Anything that you're going through negatively, I think it's important for us to have positive self-affirmations and positive self-talk. So this month's affirmation is, this too shall pass. And I want you to think about that this month. We all go through different things. We all go through different struggles and difficulties, but sometimes you just have to talk to yourself. This too shall pass. And also get Minda's books. They address all this.
Thank you, Mike. I have to thank you so much for the affirmations that you've been giving us every month, because last month, God knows, I had to tell myself I was made for this like 5 times a day, because I was like, I don't know, Lord. But yeah, I'm thankful for those affirmations. When we're not in spaces where other people are affirming us, we can affirm ourselves. This too shall pass. And so thank you for that. And even in those moments, use that information when you're having that difficult conversation, be it at home or in the streets or at work, whatever it is. This too shall pass. And so you might feel that angst, but I guarantee you'll always feel good when you bet on yourself. Normally I leave you all with, when we have guests on the show, we ask what their favorite rap lyric is. But today I actually want to drop another bar from Dr. Maya Angelou, because all of this, having difficult conversations, takes courage. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Whether you're asking for extra pie or something, or you're asking for $100,000 grant proposal, all of it takes courage to ask for anything, to let people know what good looks like to you. And so one of the things that I love, a quote by Maya Angelou, she says, courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage, you can't practice other virtues consistently. You can practice any virtue, but nothing consistently without courage. So we can't do a lot of things without courage. So I hope that you will turn that fear into courage. I heard it said that fear is courage that said its prayers. And so I want you to think about that this week. This too shall pass. Have those difficult conversations, because why? It's part of your psychological safety. We often talk about the workplace creating psychological safety, which they should, yes, but we can also create that for ourselves. And part of doing that is having these conversations that we have swept under the rug for too long. And so with that said, thank you all for joining us for another episode of Secure the Seat Live. We hope, I'm actually doing a talk about how to heal from racial trauma with Microsoft in 20 minutes. We're going to drop the link in the chat. It's a free talk. It's open to the public. I want to shout out Microsoft for opening this conversation to the public for the month of May, because our mental health is everything. So we want you to join if you're able to join. It's at I think 11 o'clock Pacific time, but it could be 10. But we're dropping the link in the chat. But join us. It's free. At least sign up or register, because maybe you can watch the replay if you're not able to join us. But again, thank you so much for joining us. You control your psychological safety, part of it. And so have the conversations at home, have it in and out the house, right? Because we want to be whole in every space we enter, not compartmentalized pieces of us where we feel safe. What would it look like if we're safe in all the spaces we occupy? Something to think about. All right. Keep securing your seat. We'll see you next Monday at noon.
Thank you, everybody.